Hiya. Hey. Hello, hello, hello. Okay, so I'm hoping everyone can you guys hear me? Yeah, okay. So I guess people are starting to filter into the room. We're just before 8 o'clock anyway, so I'll give it a few moments and then I'll do the introductions. I'm hoping that people manage to get through. So with this one, it's, I don't know, it's the first time I've really used Eventbrite like this, but they ask you, you go to the actual Eventbrite page, like the event page that you use to sign up, and then it, I don't know, it has a link that brings you in here. So I'm hoping that people kind of use that. Hello to those who are coming through.
Hi, Anthea.
Hey, Eve, how are you?
I'm good, I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Are you excited?
Super excited. Looking forward.
I've been talking about this all week. It's like, and the funny thing is that I had my own live yesterday, and
Yeah.
so I've been promoting this one even more than my own.
Good, so we should have an audience today then.
Yeah, we've got quite a few people to turn up actually. I haven't checked the numbers. Do you want about 30 odd people the last time I checked? So not bad, because considering we only started promoting this a couple of days ago. Okay, so for those joining, just know we've muted on entry, so your device will automatically go into mute. We'll just wait for a couple of moments just for more people to come in, and then we'll kick off. Still waiting on Celestina actually. Let me just check if I've got any messages. Bear with me one moment. Okay, so one of our guests is a little bit delayed, so I've just messaged to say that she can just jump on when she's ready. Sorry, I think, Remy, were you speaking? I think you were on mute, so I didn't hear what you said.
No, I was just saying hello to one of somebody I knew.
Oh, okay.
But it was muted, so it doesn't matter.
Okay. Listen, people can lip read these days, it's fine. Just keep saying hello. No one needs to be under mute. Okay, so I'm just going to give her the link. Bear with me one moment. And then we can get started. Okay. Okay, sorry, just give me one more moment. Okay, so as we've got, it's about 4 minutes past 8 now, so we're going to kick off because we did say 8 o'clock, and those who are hopefully still joining will pick up as we go. So just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us today. This is a really exciting topic, and we've been looking forward to having this one. So I suppose just really to kind of give a bit of an introduction. So I'm one quarter of the Up Move, and we are a platform, or essentially a group of 4 women who decided to kind of come together, especially after the events of this year, to basically have a platform where we are in a position to uplift the Black community. So we do these things by building up the community in terms of like infrastructure, us as people as well. We want to promote buying from the Black community and also educating, and this is part of what today is all about. It's about taking knowledge, our talents and skills that we have within the community, and really just sharing them and making sure that we can all uplift ourselves and find ways to move forward and progress, so that we all rise, essentially. So I won't bore you too much with that. My name is Anthea, so I'm part Up Move, and I'm also run a Markai fitness coaching, kind of mindset and weight loss coaching. At the moment, I kind of do weight loss programs and things like that. So I'm splitting my time between the two, but this is something that we're all quite passionate about. We also have on the call Tasha, who is another part of the Up Move, and she's an engineer. Sorry, I should say an award-winning engineer. Let it be known, okay. And then we've also got Shenai, who's going to be joining on the call later on, but she'll kind of fade into the background. Shenai's a HR consultant by day, Up Move whenever else we have time to do it. And I'll just hand over to Ife very quickly to introduce yourself.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name's Ifoma, it's the full version. My day job is as an IC manager, but as Amp said, you know, we all came together to really just, you know, look at what we could do to create more of a community where we're uplifting each other, learning from each other. So you probably seen me on one of the other lives that we've done. And I sort of do the helping out behind the scenes as well. But Amph is going to run this one. I think we're going to get into it because I know Eve's got to shoot off soon.
Just exposure straight away. Okay. Didn't even get a chance to introduce himself. So that brings us.
You can go first then.
That brings us to today's topic, which is let's talk about mental health. It's something that, you know, the more conversations that we seem to be having with people, the more passionate we can see that everybody is about us having, you know, positive, good mental health, because that essentially drives our way and allows us to navigate through life without having a lot of kind of issues, basically. And so we've got 3 very special guests joining us today. Celestina, you came just in time. And so I'm just going to ask them to briefly introduce themselves. You would have seen their bios on our Eventbrite page. But Remy, if I start with you, if you want to just introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Remy Ray. I'm a serial entrepreneur, I would say, that's worked across fashion and currently coaching business, especially Black women, but Black women in business, and hopefully using my experience to help others, you know, live a life of their full potential.
Thank you. Eve?
First of all, nice to meet you, Remy, and everyone, of course. So my name is Eve Lulengula. So originally, my background, I'm from Congo. Okay, I've been within the mental health since 2012, actually. So I completed my degree in psychology, and then I went to do my master's in psychological well-being. And then I went to do 1-year training to acquire my degree to work as a psychological well-being practitioner. So this is to work with people with mild symptoms of depression and anxiety. And at the moment, I'm currently doing my CBT training, which will help me to work with those with more severe symptoms of both anxiety and depression. My training is going to be 1 year long. I started it literally on Monday, but that's going to give me the accreditation to work independently as well. And my aim is to use that training to support our community as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Celestina? Sorry, just as you got water.
Hi everyone, I'm Celestina. I'm CEO and founder of Floating Counseling, as well as a psychotherapist and a parent coach. I feel like I should list my credentials like he did. But yeah, I'm passionate about the Black community. I'm passionate about helping people in general, but especially about the Black community, because I find that there's a lot of things that, you know, we call culture, that, you know, is not necessarily a positive thing. That is just something that maybe the last two generations did, and then now is culture, now is what we must all kind of follow. Whereas, you know, I feel like, you know, it's about time we stop and actually look at it and question why we do certain things that we do. So I'm really passionate about the way that we think, why we do what we do. So that's really kind of goes in line with some of the practices that I use, some of the techniques that I use to work with my clients and my parents, for them to be able to parent more effectively, for them to raise more resilient and confident children. Because if we're more resilient, if we're more confident, then it doesn't matter what life really throws at us, because life is going to throw things at us, at every single one of us. But it's about us building children that can sustain and that can, you know, overcome whatever life throws at them without kind of giving up and feeling like life is just too much for them. So yeah, so I am passionate about helping the Black community heal from trauma and raise better children, better generation.
Brilliant. I love that. Thank you all for the guests for your introductions. I hope that's for everyone has given them a bit of an idea about kind of what their background is, where their passions lie, and how they'll contribute to this conversation. So just a very quick housekeeping thing is that everybody's on mute at the moment except for the guests. So if you have any questions, please do put them into the chat, which we'll be monitoring, and we'll drop those questions in as and when appropriate, or we'll have a stopping point where we actually go into the chat and take questions from there. So feel free to drop any questions that you've got in there and we'll come back from that. So I guess really what the best thing to do is kind of kick off just from what Celestina was saying is about mental health, the impacts of it and how we kind of move forward. But if we just kind of took a complete step back, what is mental health and why is it important? If I could direct that to you, Celestina.
Yeah, I mean, that's an awesome question. And because a lot of the time when I hear people talk about mental health, they're like, oh, I don't have mental health. Da, da, da. And it's like, well, you're alive, you're talking to me, so clearly you have mental health. Like mental health just means you have a mind. You're able to think, you're able to process information. That just, you know, is like physical. Do you have a physical body? Then you have a physical health. You have a mind, then you have a mental health. So, you know, so to answer your question, mental health just simply means you have a mind, and whether or not it's functioning healthily or unhealthily then depends where on the spectrum of mental health you're at, whether you're mentally ill or you're mentally stable. So it's really a spectrum. I call it a spectrum anyways. Mental health is a spectrum. So it just depends where you are on the sliding scale of healthy or not healthy. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And just kind of following on from that then, I guess just something that you mentioned earlier about kind of, you know, sorry, this is more directed to Remy. You mentioned around, you know, Black women and wanting to empower them. Why is mental health important to Black people in general?
I really started my journey, I guess, with having this understanding of what mental health is only really in the last 2-3 years, and you know, just delving in a little bit deeper with some of the hiccups that I've had with trying to be an entrepreneur, banging my head and then going into like slight depressions. Like not many people speak about the fact that a lot of solo entrepreneurs are quite lonely and quite sad when they build their companies. And I just started to see myself having really big dips, and not really knowing who to turn to, and then speaking to my family and them saying, why would you need to go and speak to external people about these problems? Like keep the information in the house, as a lot of Caribbean people tend to do. And I think slowly but surely I started to realize from just the conversations that I had with friends and people that I would engage with that there was a common thread here. A lot of the women were depressed, but not saying they're depressed, just still carrying on that strong superwoman kind of syndrome. But then having private conversations with me, or me having private conversations with them, I would see that actually this seems to be quite common with women, especially women that are building something, or the women that are holding down the fort in some capacity, whether it's with family or business or even with their careers. And so being a Black woman, I think it's just innate. It just happened very organically. And now I find myself here wanting to just continue to help and row the boat in some capacity so more of us can get help.
Yeah, and I think you shed quite important light on the issue of mental health within the community, Black community, I would say, actually. Because I think with your answer, you very much touched upon the kind of stigma that people still have when it comes to mental health, but also when it comes to sharing a problem, isn't it? And something that Celestina also mentioned is, we all have a mental health. Having a mental health is not a bad thing, because some people have good mental health and poor mental health, and all of it is within a spectrum, really. And it's, I suppose, someone's mental health is also perhaps the ability to cope with daily stresses, okay, but also the ability to be able to manage daily activity, because poor mental health basically indicates the inability to manage on a daily basis, the inability to function, to go to work, to sleep effectively, but also eating. I think poor mental health really impacts us in a very kind of wide sense of our daily life. It can impact us socially, educationally as well. So it's definitely a topic that needs to be had, I feel, within the Black community, because I think a part of it is very much in relation to acceptance and education. But before we actually get there, I think the education part is quite important, because not many of us actually know what poor mental health actually looks like. What is anxiety and depression? And first of all, what's the difference between the two of them? Which a lot of people may not necessarily have the awareness of.
I think also as well, we have to, so my background is in essentially mental health, like I don't have any qualifications or anything there, but I think we also have to be mindful of the language. All of a sudden we find ourselves in the midst of all this new language that nobody really understands. And like, I'm sure I'm going to learn much on this call today, but I just think that sometimes we have to strip things back and think, not everybody is at that stage where they understand everything about mental health, but the word gets thrown around so much that I'm like, oh, that's mental health and that's mental health. And I don't really know where I stand sometimes. So you guys got anything from me, I'll happily take it. Because I just think that, like you're saying, education is really important, and so much has changed for the community in the last couple of weeks, much less years. Do you know what I mean? So
absolutely, I completely agree with what you've both said, especially what you've just said in regards to, there's a lot of words that get thrown around. And I've been a psychotherapist for almost 15 years. And sometimes when I hear certain words get thrown around, it triggers me. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, certain things like, oh, you're so bipolar. Why is that word a joke? Or, oh, I like cleaning, I'm so OCD. And it's like, that's not really what OCD means. OCD don't mean you like cleaning. OCD means, you have a behavior that you can't control. It can simply be switching on and off the light 50 times a day. It's not all about cleaning. Some people have OCD for cleaning and they can't control it. But, just because you like cleaning. So there's a lot of words that get thrown around now. Oh, someone's feeling a bit, a certain way today. And they're like, oh, I'm depressed. And it's like, that's really not what depression is. You're feeling a bit low today is not what depression is. So I get really triggered and I'm just like, okay, so the only way to overcome this is clearly education. Because the word gets thrown around so much that it's now become just part of the way people
everyday
talk.
language. Yeah,
exactly. It's just part of the language. You're feeling a bit low or you're depressed, and it's not taken seriously. And the people that are actually depressed, they feel like because it's thrown around so much, some of them feel like because it's thrown around so much, it's not serious. And especially in the Black community, and I guess you both mentioned this as well, in the Black community, there's just this stigma around it. There's just this Superman and Superwoman, we must march on, we must overcome. And, culture comes in it, religion comes in it of, you must overcome, why you're sad, you've got God, why you sad, you've got a roof over your head, you've got food in your tummy. And, there's just so many misunderstandings and there's so many, so many people hold so much things in because, again, like you said, once they start saying, oh, I'm this or I'm this, seriously, they're this or this, they feel like the stigma is there and they can't talk openly to their family and their close ones because they will just be shut down as in there's nothing wrong with you. You just sad today. Whereas, they could have been gone on for for longer. So just to clarify, depression tends to be when you have been feeling low, unable to eat, just, not your usual, I would say not your usual self, not your usual popular bubbly self for over 2 weeks. It can be longer. So it's not just, a couple of days, you're feeling a bit down, a couple of days, you don't really want to come out of bed because it's a bit dark outside for a few days. It's for long period of time. So 2 weeks of really low mood, of really not wanting to eat, or really not wanting to do what you usually would be able to do. And there's certain things that there's certain disorders that can mimic each other. So this is why it's so important to go to your doctors and have that conversation with your GP and have that conversation with a therapist that's actually qualified, because a lot of the time I find people listen to social media or they listen to podcasts and they're like, oh, I think I'm OCD because this podcast or this influencer said da la la la, and I match all those things on those lists. And it's like, well, that's really not how you
We love a shortcut in our community. We love a shortcut. That is the problem. Yeah. We read a little title and we're like, yes, this is me. I'm like, oh God. Yeah, but I hear you.
Absolutely. Yes, we love shortcut. But actually going to a specialist and actually going to a GP or a psychotherapist or a counselor to actually talk about it is such a burden for some people, because it is become part of our culture. Not to share, not to hang your dirty laundries outside. That's what they tend to call it. So, why would you want to tell a stranger your dirty laundry? Why would you want to tell a stranger the family business? So it's all hidden. And a friend of mine and I were talking the other day, and I said something, and I actually made a meme out of it because I thought this is so profound. That mold grows in darkness. But once you shed the light on it, you're aware that, okay, you've got mold. You draw your curtain, you clean it. There's no more mold. So it's like, when we keep it in darkness, when we keep it within just the family, not shed light on it, not get help, that's when it tends to get worse. It doesn't get better in darkness. Mold does not get better in darkness. And a lot of the time, that's how I find, that's why therapy and, this kind of community is so important, to shed light on, whatever it is you've gone through. And, I always say to people, we've all been through one trauma or the other. It's not I went through a worse trauma than you kind of thing. We've all gone through trauma. But how do we manage it? Do we know how to manage it? And I guess that's why we're here today, to kind of talk about how we can manage in the Black community.
And the thing is, though, I find even from...
Yeah,
so
and also just to touch up on what you said.
Sorry, Eve, can I just jump in for a sec? Yeah. So just coming from an African background, I'm just thinking back to something that Remy said, which connects to something Celestina said. So we as Africans, we're growing up, we're told the same thing you've said, is you don't tell your business, you don't talk about this, you're barely even encouraged to talk about your feelings. And so if you think from as a child, you're asked to bottle things up, you're asked to internalize everything, and you go through adulthood unprepared to actually even identify your own emotions. And so when you get to these kind of ages and you're kind of like, I should feel like I'm happier, or I should feel a certain type of way. When someone mentions something like counseling, it's like you've just put them on like some stage. There are 50,000 people there. I can't sing. Like, you've just exposed them. Like, for me to now not even be able to talk to my family, and you want me to go and talk to a stranger. It's like, how do you get someone from having such closed off feelings, or feeling so isolated in terms of like their emotions and being able to process their mental health, to a point where they're even able to consider talking to somebody else?
I personally lead via action. So I started my journey with a therapist about 1.5 years ago, roughly, let's say 18 months. And I started using my Instagram to show me just about to enter therapy, and then some of what came out emotionally after, not telling my whole entire confidential conversation, but a decent amount, so that people could understand that it's okay to feel vulnerable, it's okay to enter these spaces. And slowly but surely, people just started DMing me and asking for information of where they could find a therapist, or what was my therapist like. There was a lot of mystery, if you wanted, whether or not this was a space for me. And every time I went, I would just continue to show a little bit of my process. Even if I cried, I would tell them I cried, or if something was bothering me because I didn't grow up with my dad, I would say certain things that I knew were specific to our community that a lot of people struggled with. And slowly but surely, they just keep coming and asking me for the details of my therapist, which I love, or the network that I got my therapist from. And now I have like an initiative. I got a goal that I started in June to pay for 10 women to participate in an introductory session with my therapist. Just because I realized that I don't want to be the only one that's saved here, right? Like, all these conversations that I keep having are with women that are struggling immensely, and I can't help them because that's just not my area of expertise. And so far I've done 7 women, which I'm paying for, like, out of my little hustles or whatever. And so far 7 women have gone. Some women have felt a benefit of it, and some, you know, are not ready to embark on the process, but at least we've planted a seed, right? Maybe they tell someone who tells somebody that it's okay, this space is not actually bad, or whatever it may be. So I'm still learning as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that with us, Remy. It sounds like you've done quite a lot of positive work, and it really does. And I think when it comes to mental health, a lot of it's to do with normalizing having psychotherapy is not necessarily something that's to be frowned upon. And I think psychotherapy or counseling or even CBT is very normal within the USA, actually, America. You know, people have counselors on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. And
I think there's something about money there, though, right? Black people, well, not everyone, but most Black people think it's really expensive to see a therapist or something. So a lot of them are afraid to go.
Yeah, 100%. So there's different factors, and actually there's a way that you can get free therapy within the NHS. Actually, not a lot of people know about this. I can talk about it perhaps a bit later on, but I think a point that Anthea and Celestina made in relation to perhaps us within the Black community suppressing our emotions and suppressing our trauma, that's a very interesting fact, actually, because within mental health within the NHS, we have 2 different levels. So we have primary care and secondary care. So primary care is kind of treatments for people who are experiencing short-term, but also mild to moderate symptoms of depression and anxiety. And then secondary care perhaps is a bit long-term, chronic symptom, but also symptoms that's a bit more severe. But what's quite interesting, for the Black community, we are underrepresented within the primary care. Okay. When we move to secondary care, we are overrepresented. Okay. Which tells you something very interesting there. So it tells us that perhaps we don't seek help when we need to, but we only seek help when it's absolutely necessary, where we go to a point where perhaps we can't function anymore. Okay. And there's very key statistics that shows this. So kind of psychotic symptoms and severe mental health is actually 7 times more, so Caribbean men are 7 times more likely to experience kind of severe and chronic symptoms of mental health than any other kind of ethnicity background and groups, which is quite interesting. So, and I think we touched upon this already, you know, what are the factors that perhaps stop us from seeking that initial support within primary care? So we talked about financial, perhaps perception, we talked about family and stigma, and perhaps we talked about our own perception in relation to thinking it's going to be an embarrassing process. Yeah.
And for me, what I tend to find is also upbringing. So I believe, I can't remember, I think somebody mentioned it earlier in regards to when, I think it was Anthea actually, when you are told to suppress your emotion from really early, because I'm African. So, and I remember, like, you know, when you would get beaten, you get that punishment, discipline, you would want to cry and you'd be told, shh, 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 don't make noise, don't make noise. So you can imagine as a child, you want to cry, you've been beaten, you've been hit, and the instinct of the body is for you to cry or for you to cry out in pain, and you have to learn to shh, 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 and hold it in from really early. And then we grow up and society tells us you're Black, you're strong, you can handle it. Your ancestors were Black and strong, you can handle it. So you learn to handle it and you learn to carry on. And then you get to a stage where you just can't go on anymore. And that's when we get into the second level, where you literally need to be like, someone needs to take control and lock you up, hospitalize you, you need to be on medication. Therapy is just not enough anymore. You need medication and therapy. You need someone, you need a care assistant to kind of monitor you. And, your control has been taken out of your hand because we were not able to manage certain things so early. So I think it's so important that we need to kind of go back and be like, how are we raising our children? What are we teaching our children about their emotion? I think Anthea also mentioned, when you don't even know your emotion, because again, I always say in my presentations, I say, because I'm a parent coach, and I say to parents, when we're raising children, we teach them things like head, shoulders, knees, and toes, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, but we're not teaching them about the mind. We're not teaching them the cognition of the mind. We're not teaching them, they tend to, they teach smile means sad face, and then there's angry, and then that's literally all the emotion that they teach. But there's about 26, if not 30 other emotions that human go through. So when we don't know those emotions, and I'm not happy, and I'm not sad, and I'm not angry, but what am I? I feel like crying, but that's not really an emotion. That's like what I just feel like. And it just really gets confusing because we don't know what these things are. We've not been taught.
Where are we supposed to change? Where are we supposed? So we go from children and we're told to suppress everything, right? And then we get older and we're told to be open and honest and trust people and all of this kind of stuff. But where is that transition? Where does that take place? Where who's told us now you're an adult, you should lean into this or lean into that? I think that there's definitely a blockage of information going up and down the pipes within our community, and that's across the board, not even just mental health, right? We're seeing the financial education now become a massive thing in the community and people just having more transparent conversations. But I'm 33 now, actually. I had to learn that myself. Like, nobody told me, I think you should go to therapy. I just decided myself. But what if you don't have that initiative?
True.
Unfortunately, I think, each individual, just either you surround yourself with people who just want the best for you and, kind of guide you in that way. But, we can't control people, it really has to come from that individual. I mean, we can try to get people into therapy, but like you said, you've put it out there that you want to support 10 women to go into therapy. And some have kind of engaged in that process and others haven't. Because when you don't engage in that process, you lock off, you go, but you're not really there. You don't really want to be there. So it really has to come from that person. That person really has to be like, I want help. It's like an addict, they have to get to a place of, I want help, because, you can get them to rehab as many times as you want, but they're going to come out and they're going to go back to their old ways. So that individual really it just has to come from you of, I need help. I want help. I want to be better. I need to be better, either for myself or for my family or for my next, it just has to come from that individual. But the most that we can do is, the things that, you're doing is basically, you're letting your social media, you're doing on the social media platform of, this is how my journey has been. And it's kind of getting people to think, oh, okay, maybe I should have therapy. And, this kind of platform that we're having now where we're talking about it openly, whereas before would have been a shh, let's have a quiet meeting in the corner. Let's not let other people hear, we're having. So, there's a lot of information out there where people can, if they want to, they can speak to the GP, but then again, it's just that, but it really just has to come from the person. You just have to kind of, but we're here. Therapists are here. You're there. You're giving all this, support that you're willing to pay for them to have therapy, which is amazing.
Yeah, and I think psychoeducation is quite important too. I think what you mentioned, Celestina, is very, very important. I think internally it has to come from the person that wants to seek support. But I think as friends and family members, I think the more we are educated about recognizing symptoms of depression and anxiety, the more we can also pull perhaps a loved one aside and perhaps give them a bit of a nudge to say, are you okay? Because I've noticed that perhaps that maybe your sleeping pattern has changed, and this has been for more than 2 weeks. And I think having that conversation is quite important. And coming back to the question that you asked, Remy, in relation to perhaps there seems to be a contradiction, and you mentioned that as well, Celestina, in relation to when we're younger, we are told very much to suppress our emotions. And then perhaps when we find ourselves maybe in secondary school, we have all this responsibility to take on. And then all of a sudden, we don't know how to regulate our emotions because we're so used to suppressing it. And I think that's absolutely true, really, really true. because emotional suppression isn't good for emotional regulation at all. It's a poor way to regulate our emotion. And actually for a child to effectively develop the emotional kind of mechanisms, they need to be able to experience both positive and negative emotions, but also themselves and with the help of adults learn effective ways to deal with that. Okay, so by us telling our youngest to just deal with it, you're a strong black woman or you're a strong black man, that's not necessarily helpful at all. So yes, I think there's a bit of a contradictory there, because once we grow up, all of a sudden we tell adults to talk about your emotions, express it
out. Yeah,
the truth is not a lot of us know how to do that.
Oh, definitely. And I can probably say, I mean, as an adult, it's kind of like, and it even just comes from things like having a support system. So I've got Iffy, I've got Tash, I've got Shen, but it's funny how you can be really close to people but still not close to people.
Yeah.
And it's like you're going through something, and even admitting to somebody other than yourself that there's potentially a problem is something that's really, really difficult. I actually think that's probably the biggest part. All of the other things can flow, and that kind of links into what Celestina was saying about it's actually saying I want help. The problem is that a lot of people are not yet at that place. But just before we kind of move on, I just got a couple of questions coming in. I should say I have so many questions just myself, and I'm like, okay, relax, it's not about you. So just a couple of questions that have come in. The first is can you give us a clear definition? I'm not sure if that's directed to Eve, because I think you were talking about anxiety and depression. Someone is asking for what is the difference between anxiety and depression?
So depression and anxiety can differ in relation to how it's presented on a daily basis, and also how it's presented in relation to how our thinking process happens. So the way that I would explain is depression is very much when you have lost a battle. Does that make sense? So you've fallen off the horse and you don't want to go back into it. So it's a sense of social withdrawal, withdrawing from social activities, feeling quite low in mood, quite lethargic as well. So your appetite would usually change. So you don't want to fight no more. And sometimes as well, it impacts your motivation levels as well. So you find yourself not doing the things that you used to do before, such as it could be any form of activities, hobbies, but ultimately as well, it's very much presented with negative thoughts. So all of a sudden you become very pessimistic about everything. You have almost like a devil whispering in your ear all the time to say, this is pointless, what is the point of carrying on living? So that's very much a very depressive presentation. Anxiety is slightly different. So anxiety is perhaps where you are on hyper alert, you're struggling, but you still want to continue fighting, and that can sometimes present itself in sense of consistent worrying about things that haven't happened yet, things that have already happened, but also it can present itself in relation to catastrophizing, so making a mountain out of something very small. Okay, so anxiety is very much an umbrella term to characterize different psychological conditions. So within anxiety, we can talk about social anxiety, and so which is specifically the anxiety within social situations and interaction with others. We have health anxiety, so the constant worrying about your own health and thinking that something is wrong with you internally, okay? But also health anxiety can also present itself in relation to you having worries about family members' health. Perhaps you can wake up and have a sore throat and all of a sudden you think it's throat cancer. So that's very much in health anxiety presentation. We also have generalized anxiety disorder, which is quite common. So this is the excessive worry. So you worry constantly about anything and everything, okay? You also have perhaps agoraphobia. Some of you might have heard of it. So agoraphobia is perhaps the fear of going out in open spaces, in public situations. We also have panic disorder, so that's another anxiety presentation. So clearly, depression is what it is because it's just one term and one presentation, but anxiety is more from an umbrella term, and these are some of the anxiety disorders that we categorize within anxiety itself.
But that I'm assuming that if you don't get your anxiety under control, that could potentially lead to depression, because it's just so overwhelming. You no longer feel like you can cope.
Indeed, yes. So both anxiety and depression do feed on each other. Okay. So what we tend to find is that if someone has symptoms of depression, especially which is chronic, they may also develop symptoms of anxiety and vice versa. And I think what you said there is very important. And also likely with someone who's got depression and all of a sudden you have withdrawn from society, and over a long period of time, you start to become anxious in going back there to socialize again. Does that make sense? So that can create anxiety on many different plateau levels. So they very much feed into each other. And actually, the kind of diagnostic manual that we use, a lot of the symptoms for both depression and anxiety disorders, they very much overlap. Yeah. So this is why it's important perhaps to have a psychological education and understanding of how they can present itself. But of course, within therapy, you can even kind of build upon that understanding even better.
Absolutely. And just to add to what you've mentioned in regards to what anxiety is, the way I tend to describe anxiety in therapy to even like a latent kind of way is fear. So, you know, when you wake up and you're feeling fearful about certain things or certain situations, whether it's your health, whether it's going out, so it's fear. So when I then talk about fear, it's like which part of the brain gets triggered when we humans are fearful is that part of the instinct that, you know, every human has, just that survival instinct. And, you know, a lot of the time when we're feeling fearful, the part that, you know, gets triggered is, I need to survive, you know, this situation. If I go out, I might die. If someone eats this, I might die. You know, it's that fear of survival a lot of the time. And, you know, this can also lead into, you know, like I said, depression. It can lead into OCD. It can lead into so many other aspects when you have that fear and it's not dealt with. And the part of the brain that tends to get triggered, like I said, the part of the brain that gets triggered is the fear. So that survival instinct. And, you know, not everyone goes into a fight mode when you're in survival instinct. Some people just, you know, they withdraw, which is the flight. You know, they don't want to have confrontation. They don't want to go out. They don't want to face it. They don't want to even tell anyone what is happening to them. So they just really withdraw. Other people freeze, like they can't think, they can't do it. They feel that they're unable to do anything. So that's just how, you know, so it just depends what kind of characteristics you are. How you've been raised also determines how your anxiety will present itself. If you are a fighter, and that is, you know, the survival instinct that you tend to go into when you are like that, you know, then that's how your anxiety will tend to display itself. If you freeze, if you're someone that freezes, that, you know, when, you know, for example, if that's how you've been raised. And I tend to find that, you know, a lot of the time the Black community, not everyone in the Black community, but they tend to go into flight or freeze when it comes to anxiety, which is just, and I believe that that's part of, you know, for me, from the studies that I've done and from researches, I think that's the spanking that has caused that. Because of course, when you're spanking a child, they can't react the way that, you know, the body would tell them to react, which is to fight you, which is to stop you, which is to hold you down kind of thing. So from early, a lot of the time, the Black community, children have been raised to kind of go into this whether flight or freeze. And then when they get into the normal world, again, I'm slightly digressing there, but I'm going to come back. When they get into the normal world and they get into confrontation, they go into the fight mode because then now I can fight you. So, you know, a lot of the time, you know, because of the way that children are raised, it really affects the way we react and the way our disorders and mental health, whether illnesses, whatever the spectrum may be, the way it presents itself, it really, you know, but in the Black community, because of the way we tend to raise children in the Black community, it tends to be these two, flight or freeze, especially when it comes to things like anxiety. But yeah, when they get into confrontation, men tend to actually, Black men I've found tend to actually go into still flight or freeze. They don't really necessarily want confrontation. They might want confrontation sometimes, but a lot of the time, men are just not in the, Black men anyways, which is probably why they are less likely to seek help till it's too late, because again, they don't want to confront it. Because when you're a fighter, you want to confront situations. So really and truly, it tends to be, you know, they don't want to confront it, which is probably why they don't acknowledge that I need help and I need to get help now, and to fix me now kind of thing, because that's kind of like a instinct of a fighter. Let me fix this. Let me deal with this right now. And I think it all kind of stems from how we raise children. And I think that's what the Black community really needs to start looking at. How are we raising our children? Are we allowing them to process their emotion, understand their emotion, and just be who they are and stop the spanking?
Yeah, and it's funny because there's, again, I have so many questions. I'm really trying. So there's one thing I definitely wanted to come back to, but just following on from what you just mentioned, Celestine, because there's a question being asked about how can we help children with their mental health and understanding, like, what are the warning signs in children that there might be some issues in terms of their mental health, and what can we do once we know that there potentially are issues?
What you can do is stop the spanking, have an open communication with your child, because every child is different. So again, it depends what kind of instinct, what kind of personality the child has. Some children are just withdrawn anyways. So, I can't say that if your child becomes withdrawn, then, that means, and for a length of time, that means that, you need to kind of be concerned, because some children just feel like they don't really want to socialize with other people, and they just kind of like their own mini world. So it really depends what your child is like. But if they change, if their eating habits change, and you can't quite pinpoint it, or they can't necessarily even word why, a lot of the time children will get to a place where they're just like, I don't know, I don't want it. Or why don't you want to eat? I don't want to eat. Or why are you eating so much? Because I want to eat. So they're not necessarily even going to be able to even words and understand why they're doing a lot of things, because children are reactive. So they just react. They don't necessarily stop to process it. And I guess it's up to us, the adults, to help them stop and process it and help them word it. And we have to really start really early for them to get to a adolescence age, for them to actually be able to be like, oh, it's because of da la la la. But so for me, it's really start as early as possible. And if you realize that your child does need help, then I would definitely say go to a GP, get help. Don't wait till it's, catastrophical situation are happening, or they're getting excluded and expelled in school all the time, or you see marks on their body, or you see that, you're finding food inside the bags that they're not eating their food, or you're hanging around. Don't wait for things to happen before you get help for your child. If you're concerned, get help as soon as possible.
But just jumping in there then, because and this is something that, I think, especially over the last couple of months, certain things have been highlighted around going to the GP. Like, as Black people in general, you go to the GP and you're just dismissed. I don't have a problem. Oh, it can't be that bad. As if to say our pain threshold is some kind of superhuman thing, that when we go there, we're burdening someone. And I think going through, and even me especially, it's like, and it's funny because sometimes I have to get like encouragement from my friends who were telling me, no, go to the GP and insist that you get a referral. Go to the GP and tell them that but it's like, these things should be natural to us, but they're not. And so the problem that we've had is that when we're going through life and we're going to the GP and we're constantly getting dismissed from there, basically saying that our ailments or our issues or whatever aren't necessarily important, at what point when you're a parent, do you decide that you're going to take your child to the same GP who then decides to dismiss the symptoms or the warning signs that you can clearly see? How do you navigate that? Is there anywhere else that you could take your child other than the GP if you don't have confidence in them?
If you don't have confidence in them, then I would definitely say go to a different GP, or just get a therapist or get a psychologist. And, and I know, and you can self-refer now. You don't even have to wait for the GP to refer you to be on the waiting list to get therapy. And I'm sure, you guys will discuss this a bit later. But, we don't have to wait for GPs anymore. And of course, because I know, I'm kind of like, I'm a private therapist. So, there's a lot of people who's not going to be able to afford £90 an hour or £125 an hour. But NHS is there. You can absolutely self-refer now. If your GP is refusing your child help, if scam, what they call, I think they're called scam, not called scam, but the children's version of basically the IAPT. If they're not taking you seriously, then you can completely self-refer. And I would just say, just badger them, because this is your child's health. And sometimes you kind of have to look at it as because of what we've been through, unfortunately, we are seen as superhuman. And the system needs to change. But again, we can't give up just because the system has not changed. And you have to think, I need to put my child first. because the system might not necessarily back you in certain situations, and a lot of the time the system is not backing us. Oh, I love the fact that he's putting he's putting some support link in there as well. That's awesome. Yeah, so you can self-refer to IACT. You don't have to wait for your GP. And, you know, just what I was saying in regards to the fact that, you know, the ancestors, Black ancestors, the things that they went through, it's still impacting us now in the Black community, because again, they do see us as superhuman. You know, they cut them open and, you know, they told them not to speak, they told them not to cry. And because they were able to sustain that pain, now they, you know, the system has downplayed to the fact that we are superhuman. So we are the only ones that can change that. And we have to keep going at them to make sure that you get help for your child. I mean, I'll give my own personal story of when I was younger. When I was younger, my spine wasn't straight. My stepsister found out that my spine looked a bit curved. One shoulder was lower than the other. My dad took me to the GP. The GP was like, oh, your child is growing fine. She's only 9, 10. You know, she'll grow up. She'll, you know, she'll stretch out. And my dad took me like literally every single week till they did something to did a scan and the MRI scan and the whole lot. So you know what? You have to be your child's advocate. You have to take your child and make sure that they get the help that you think they do, without making it too anxious, because again, you know, as a parent, you can get a bit anxious, and then that can kind of make the child a bit more anxious. So I guess as calmly as possible, without kind of scaring the child as well.
I think that we need to start investing in experts. I think sometimes we like to leave stuff within the community to somebody else to say yes or no. Like, one, I can advocate for the NHS because a Black woman therapist from my GP who I was referred to, she literally saved my life. I had a terrible breakup when I was a lot younger, and as you do when you're young, I thought my life was over. I was like, oh my God, Jesus, I can't get through this, whatever. But that woman just really helped me just get some clarity of thought. I wasn't like, you know, suicidal or anything, but she just helped clear my mind. So I can advocate for their GP, but also I just think that we need to be mindful, like, stop getting your kids these Jordan trainers and start putting some money down to invest in your child. If it means you need to pay for an expert or somebody of that nature to just check your child over, get a second of opinion, I think we need to start doing more of that too. And I just wanted to go back a little bit about the fact that you were saying about not disciplining the child, you know, beating the children and stuff like that. I was definitely beaten, but I just wanted to say about valuing self, because a lot of the fact that the kids aren't valuing who they are from a very young age, it's spilling over into adulthood. And a lot of the women I speak to, we don't charge our worth when it comes to consultancy work or work. In the workplace, we're consistently underpaid. Even we can't even raise funding. So do you know what I mean? There's like a whole ecosystem to keep us shut out in some instances. And I think that we need to do more work around the value in self and stop asking for other people to validate us. We need to be the reason why, you know, we need to be the catalyst or the change. And that's going to start from the children, right? Making sure that they understand that they're beautiful, making sure that they know that they're worth something, you know, that their story is important, that their impact is important and stuff like that. Because it's definitely what I'm seeing with the adult Black community, especially with women.
Definitely, definitely.